is Leslie Widener, and I am a 7th grade life science teacher. In this video, we are going to go over Quiz 6 on Science Competencies 11 and 12. Competencies 11 and 12 are life science competencies. Life science is the study of living organisms and life processes, so let's get started. Number 1, muscle cells work together to form muscle tissue, which is responsible for voluntary and involuntary movement in the body and requires lots of energy. As a result, which of the following cellular organelles are present in muscle cells in large numbers? So this is a tricky question. Just because it says which of the following cellular organelles are present in muscle cells, the first thing I think about is that all of these organelles are found in muscle cells, but which one is present to actually help with the muscle cell itself is what is important. So it's good to know what each organelle does. The Golgi apparatus and endoplasmic reticulum have to do with protein production. The Golgi apparatus helps package proteins, and the endoplasmic reticulum helps transport proteins. Lysosomes specifically clean up waste that are found within the cells and recycle it. And then the mitochondria is known as the powerhouse of the cell. So when you see the little carrot with its muscles, I like to think about the powerhouse and knowing that it's helping convert energy for the cell to use. Here in the question, what stood out to me is that which is responsible for voluntary and involuntary movement in the body and requires lots of energy. Energy is the key word. And when we're thinking about muscle uses and what our muscles do to help us with movement, the mitochondria helps with energy production. So the answer is going to be D. Number 2, which of the following classification levels is the most diverse? Family, kingdom, order, or species? To answer this question, it's helpful to know what the level of classification is and are. So here we have a diagram, and it goes through the levels of classification. Kingdom is the one at the top, and so specifically kingdom Animalia is for this diagram here. So we have kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. As you see, it goes from broad to very specific to get down all the way to species. And so to help answer this question, again, it's important to know the order that the levels of classification are. And so the one that's going to be most diverse is the one on top because it has all of the categories here. So the answer to number 2 is B. Question number 3. Genetic information in all organisms, people, polar bears, and petunias is organized into long chains called cells, DNA, glucose, and amino acids. Here, what I like to think about is what all of these options look like. And so when I think about a cell, here we have a plant and animal cell. They're small structures that make up living things. DNA, I know, is the genetic information, so obviously that is the obvious answer. But when you think about DNA, you think about a double helix strand. And so here I pulled an image where you see it coiled up into a chromosome. Chromosomes are found inside the nucleus, which is found inside of the cell. So that is a good answer too, because we know that cells could be tricky here because you might think of like, okay, cells automatically have everything that polar bears, people, and petunias make up, but we're thinking about the genetic information specifically. Just to have an idea of what glucose and amino acids are as well, though. Glucose is a sugar that is found in our body, and obviously things get broken down into sugar, and that's glucose in our body, but it's not going to contain genetic information. And then amino acids actually build up proteins. So our body uses amino acids as building blocks for proteins for our body to use. So when it comes to these 4 options, I just wanted you to have a visual in case a question like this comes up again. But genetic information in all organisms, the answer is going to be B, DNA. Next. Question number 4. Lacewings are insects that hatch from eggs. Which of these correctly compares the lacewing life cycle to a frog life cycle? Here, what I'm going to think about is what is the life cycle of a frog? And so in my head, I just know when I think about an adult frog, I know that they start off as a tadpole. And so tadpoles have to be laid in the water. And there's a few stages where it's going to grow its legs and then go into land and then be able to have a 4-process life cycle. So here, with the adult lacewings, we have our 4 answer choices. Adult lacewings lay eggs, but adult frogs give birth to live larvae. That is not true because it's not larvae, it's a tadpole. B, when they hatch, both lacewings and frogs have long legs for jumping. That's obviously not true because here, even though that we see the egg hatch into the lacewing in this image specifically, it is not jumping. They usually fly. C, when they hatch, young lacewings and young frogs look different from their adult forms, and I believe that is true. So if you see here, here's like the young stage of a lacewing, and here's the adult stage of a lacewing, and they do look differently. Same thing with frogs when they are small. They look different from when they become an adult. And then D, both adult lacewings and adult frogs have more legs than they have as larvae, and that's not true. They are both born with the same amount of legs. So the answer choice here is letter C. Question number 5. This system is responsible for breaking down and extracting nutrients from foods that we eat. So here we have our 4 systems. We have our digestive system, our muscular system, integumentary system, and skeletal system. So when I think about this question, one of the things I love about life science is that I think about how it's so applicable, and I can think about myself in this question. So whenever I'm eating food, I know it's going to get digested. So A stands out to me for that. Muscular system, I think about our muscles, and back to question 1, what does our muscular system do? It helps with movement. And so even though we need food for energy, it's not going to be what's helpful for when it comes to breaking down and extracting nutrients from foods that we eat. The integumentary system is our covering system, so it is our skin. That is not going to be what's broken down. And then our skeletal system is our, like, what provides our structure for our body, and it's our framework. So the answer here is going to be A. Question number 6. In dragons, the gray allele is dominant, capital G, over the recessive orange allele, little g. If a homozygous recessive female dragon mated with a heterozygous male dragon, what is the probability of having a gray offspring? So this is a tough genetic question, in my opinion. In genetics, it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of practice. So here's my basic overview of how I would solve this problem. First, I would go ahead and draw a Punnett square. After having my Punnett square, I would take a look at the words here. So here we see where it says homozygous recessive. Homozygous recessive, it doesn't matter if you do the G's and the Punnett square above or below or to the side. But when it comes to homozygous recessive, the key word here I'm looking at is homozygous. So meaning that the female dragon is going to give 2 little G's. So here's my attempt of drawing 2 little G's. All right, and it's going to mate with a heterozygous male dragon. Heterozygous meaning different. But however, since it's dominant, it's always going to go first. So we're going to do a capital G, and then again, being heterozygous, we would have a lowercase g. So then I would go ahead and fill in my Punnett square. Whenever we have the Punnett square set up, you're going to want to always do the capital letter first before the lowercase letter. So here I have my capital G and then my lowercase g. You do the one from the left and then from the right, or if like the capital letters was up top, you would do the capital letter first. But here below, we just have 2 little g's. All right, that is my attempt for my little g's and my big g's. So here, again, looking at the question, what's the probability of having the offspring? So you have to set up a Punnett square, in my opinion, to be able to answer this question. I think it would be hard just to not have something written down. But what I'm looking at here is that big G, little g, big G, little g in this first quadrant and second quadrant, we have here that this is going to be 50%. Right? And then here is our 2 little g's, and that's going to be 50%. So the answer is letter C with 50% for the probability. And so that is my best explanation for this question here. Question number 7. Which of the following is our resources for which organisms will compete? Food, water, shelter, mates. Going ahead and taking a look at this question here. Food, water, shelter, and mates. I'm thinking about what organisms will compete. Like, what resources do living things need? That is the question that is going through my head. We're not going to just be competing for food. We're going to be looking for food and water for survival. And so when it comes to this question, I don't think answer 1 and letter A is going to be correct because I do need food and water to survive. Another thing for the 4 needs of living things is going to be a place to live and a place to grow. And so looking at my answer choices, 1 and 2 are great, but then we're also going to need a space to survive. So I would go ahead and cross that one out. Letter C, 1, 2, and 3 only. That is pretty, letter C and D are pretty great answers because it's either food and water. We know we need food and water to survive. We need a place to protect ourselves and grow. But question number 4 here, or not question number 4, number 4, mates, that one's a little tricky. So when it comes to organisms being able to compete, and I'm thinking of like survival of the fittest and natural selection and just what organisms need to survive and to be able to continue living and growing, you will need a mate for that to occur. So my answer choice would be letter D here. You need all 4. Question number 8. While they have similarities, the biggest difference between eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells is A, eukaryotes have a nucleus while prokaryotes do not. B, prokaryotes have a nucleus while eukaryotes do not. C, eukaryotes have mitochondria while prokaryotes do not. Or D, prokaryotes have DNA while eukaryotes do not. So when I think about eukaryotic cells, I think of you have eukaryotic cells. And so I always think about our animal cells and what makes us up and what organelles our cells contain. So looking at our answer choices here, A, have a nucleus, or eukaryotes have a nucleus and prokaryotes do not. Looking at this image, we do see that the eukaryotic cell does have a nucleus, but the prokaryotic cells do not. So that is definitely a big difference. B, prokaryotes have a nucleus while eukaryotes do not. So prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus. So that is not the correct choice. C, eukaryotes have mitochondria, while prokaryotes do not. Although this is true, I don't think it's the biggest difference of like what's going to make, or like the biggest difference of eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells, because the nucleus is so important when it comes to DNA and what it all is able to do. And then D, prokaryotes have DNA while eukaryotes do not. That is not true because prokaryotic cells do still have DNA. They just do not have a nucleus. And so the answer choice here is letter A. Okay, going on to number 9. Here we have a wonderful diagram of the different plants: green beans, watermelon, cucumber, and pumpkins, how long it takes for them to sprout, and then when they're ready to harvest. So I love always having a visual here with these questions because I just know it's going to be a good question always when you have a diagram. So a gardener plants seeds in the garden. After the flower stage, the fruits and vegetables grow. A table of how many days are needed for some plants to be ready to harvest is shown. So that's already pointing me here. It's like I need to pay attention to the days that something's going to harvest. Which statement is supported by the data shown in the table? So what I will do is go ahead and get out my annotation here so I know I'm going to make some notes. Okay, cucumbers are ready to harvest in less time than watermelons. So here I'm going to look at watermelons first. Okay, so it only takes 80 to 100 days for watermelons to harvest. Cucumbers are ready to harvest in less time than watermelons. So here, it shows to be true. Okay. Going back to letter B. Pumpkins take the most time to sprout and are ready to be. Pumpkins take the most time to sprout and to be ready for harvesting. Here I see that it takes 85 to 120 days. Okay, that is also true. All right, then let's see here. Green bean seeds sprout faster because they are smaller than other seeds. So that question, just seeing that right now, even if you are a farmer and or a gardener and all these things about plants, that is not supported in the data table here. So I automatically know letter C is not an option. Okay, letter D. Watermelon seeds take longer to sprout because watermelon plants produce large fruits. So as we know, watermelons, if you know about a watermelon and a pumpkin, we know both of those are bigger than just green beans and cucumbers. But again, that is not being answered in our data table itself. So I know I'm going to automatically cross that out. However, what I need to look at here is my options A and B. And the question again says, which statement is supported by the data shown in the table? So cucumbers are ready to harvest in less time than watermelons. Going back to that, watermelons take 80 to 100 days for it to harvest, and cucumbers 55 to 65. So that is an obvious answer that I'm like, okay, yes, that could be the answer. Pumpkins take the most time to sprout and to be ready for harvesting. When it comes to looking at this, pumpkins take the most time to sprout. That is not true here. Because when we look at the days for it to sprout, green beans actually take the most time to sprout. So I know option B is not going to be the answer. So then letter A is our obvious answer choice. The peppered moth is widespread in Britain and Ireland and frequently found in ordinary back gardens. Peppered moths are normally white with black speckles across the wings, giving it its name. This patterning makes it well camouflaged against lichen-covered tree trunks when it rests on them during the day. There's also a naturally occurring genetic mutation which causes some moths to have almost black wings. These black wings form, called melanic, are not as well camouflaged on the lichens as normal peppered forms, so they are more likely to be eaten by birds and other predators. This means that fewer black forms survive to breed, so they are less common in the population than the paler peppered forms. In the 19th century, it was also noticed that in towns and cities, it was actually the black form of the moth that was more common than the pale peppered form. Which of the following statements best explains why? So again, I will be jumping back and forth to kind of have a visual of this question, but we see the black-winged and the peppered form here. So which of the following statements best explains why? Letter A. Industrialization and domestic coal fires had caused lichens to grow more rapidly. The peppered moth was more obvious to predators, while the black moth was better camouflaged and more likely to survive and produce offspring. So looking at this here, the question is, which of the following statement best explains why? And again, you always have to think back at the question. Especially with long problems. I almost forgot the question. So in the 19th century, it was more noticed that in towns and cities, it was actually the black form of the moth that was more common than the pale peppered form. So here I'm thinking, why is the black moth surviving more than the pale peppered form? So when it comes to this question, it says the peppered moth was more obvious to predators, while the black moth was better camouflaged and more likely to survive and produce offspring. I mean, yes and no. Industrialization and domestic coal fires had caused lichens to grow more rapidly. So that would mean that they would actually be able to hide better. The peppered moth was more obvious to predators. Not if lichen was growing quicker. So I just don't think that answer is true. Industrialization and domestic coal fires had caused sooty air pollution, which had killed off lichens and blackened urban tree trunks and walls. So it was the pale form of the moth that was more obvious to predators, while the melanic form was better camouflaged and more likely to survive and produce offspring. As a result, over successive generations, the black moths came to outnumber the pale forms in our towns and cities. I think that is pretty true, because when I'm looking here and I'm thinking about in domestic coal fires and thinking about air pollution, and it killed off the lichens on the tree, the urban tree trunks and walls as well. It blackened everything, so the black moths actually were able to be camouflaged better. So I like that answer choice. C. Industrialization and domestic coal fires had made the sky very dark. So is the pale form of the moth that was more obvious to predators, while the melanic form was better camouflaged and more likely to survive and produce offspring. So similar to the one before, the thing that I'm paying attention to are the tree trunks because we see moths going to tree trunks and hiding, but just because of the coal fires and the sky being dark, it really doesn't talk about trees and where they're going to hide. And then letter D, industrialization and domestic coal fires had caused increased snowfall in the cities. So it was now the melanic form of the moth that was more obvious to predators, while the peppered form better camouflage and more likely to survive and produce offspring. This answer choice is obviously not correct because it's wondering why the black form of the moth was more common than the pale peppered form. So we know that the black moth is going to be the one that has more production. So answer choice D to me is not obvious. So I would go ahead and eliminate D, and I would eliminate A as well. Again, going back, the peppered moth was more obvious to predators, and so forth, but that didn't give a reason why. So answer choice B stands out to me the most because it killed off the lichens and blackened the urban tree trunks in the walls, meaning that it made the tree trunks darker, as you can see in the image here. And the black moth was more camouflage, so it became to be outnumbered than the pale form. So answer choice B would be my choice here. Well, that wraps up going over quiz number 6 and the life science competencies number 11 and 12. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you.